Hello New Zealand and the world, my name is Lucas Lawmans and welcome to my new channel Kiwi Voice, where I'm going to be covering off the issues of the day, of the week, of the month, whatever you want to call it, political commentary. I just felt like it was time to get my voice out there. I really think I've got something to offer in the current climate and the current discourse that's going on around the world. So I'm stoked to finally actually be putting this together. I've been talking about it for a long freaking time, and I've got a bunch of content to share with you all. So hopefully you all enjoy it. The first video that we're going to cover off today is going through the current state of the New Zealand employment sector with regards to the effects that the vaccine mandates have had on our country and the workforces that have been mandated. Now, disclaimer with this, I've done my best to get together facts and figures around this, but going through usual internet search channels such as Google and DuckDuckGo, it has turned out to be notoriously difficult to get any real independent info and advice, or correct facts and figures I should say, around what is happening with job losses, etc. in these different industries. Unfortunately, as you'll see as the channel goes on, there might be a theme of a little bit of distrust in the current state of our mainstream media. This is well known, it's happening across the world, and to anyone that's tuning into a channel like this, it'll be fairly understandable. But unfortunately, I have had to rely on mainly mainstream sources. I will cite them as we go through. We've got to do what we've got to do to try and bring you some real info and a better, bigger, fuller picture around what's happening with these vaccine mandates in New Zealand and the effect that they're having. So what mandates are in place in New Zealand? Last year, 2021, was a tough year for all. And at certain points throughout the year, starting I think it was in July, we had a number of industries that were mandated to get the COVID-19 vaccine, of which we have the Pfizer BioNTech. Up until recently, that was the only one that was available. I think it possibly still is. There's been talk about Novavax and AstraZeneca, if it's not here already, is coming. Right through 2021, Pfizer was the one. So, the mandates that were announced were border and managed isolation workers, the education workforce, and that included preschool and early childhood education, obvious one, health and disability sector, prison workers, New Zealand Defence Force, fire and emergency services, and then finally, the most probably greyest area, the most broad-ranging mandate that was announced was for employees of hospitality and close service or close contact businesses such as hairdressers and gyms, personal trainers, etc., that wanted to participate in our vaccine pass system. Now, straight off the bat, before we go further into this, my personal views are that the vaccine pass is not going to stop transmission. I don't believe it will at all. That's my own personal opinion, just mine, shown across the world to not do anything other than the societal damage that it does do, and the division that it does cause, and of course the discrimination that instantly comes into play with such a draconian system. It's ridiculous in the extreme as far as I'm concerned, but at any rate, here we are. It's a wide-ranging mandate. I mean, look at the list. It's covering millions of New Zealand workers. Some estimates say up to 2 million. Now we'll kick it off with the border and managed isolation workers and the effect that it seems to be having on that side of things. We'll chuck this up on the screen there. We'll see in this article that Stuff has reported that 13 MIQ workers and 9 customs workers walked off the job or were forced to resign as a result of not taking the vaccine. In reality, if we look further down the article, it's giving us a bit more info. It lets us know it's more closer to 103. Now, not the hugest number, if we were totally honest in the grand scheme of things, but remembering that the vaccination does not stop transmission or contraction of the disease, it only personally limits your own risk of severe hospitalisation or death, then with any kind of loss of employment and the subsequent roll-on effects of that in society is not really the greatest idea. It doesn't really make a hell of a logical lot of sense. But also keep in mind that that's just the beginning. As we move on to the education sector, refer to this one, we'll chuck this up on the screen. Stuff here reports that over 800 teachers were most likely out of work due to these vaccine mandates. So in an already stretched and under-resourced industry, of course, that's going to have quite the significant effect. So really disappointing to see that. I mean, the effect that that's going to have on the workload of the remaining teachers, the stress that it's going to put on colleagues, etc., that were working closely with these teachers that have left, obviously the bonds that are formed with children. You can see the sort of negative roll-on effects that we've got going on with this. So that's 800 reported here. As I say, as we continue through these, it's really difficult to quantify that these numbers are accurate. Could be much, much higher. It could be lower. The most interesting one to me is the health and disability sector. Now, it's an 80,000 strong workforce, give or take a few thousand here or there, right across the DHBs over New Zealand, and already stretched. We've been talking about this for years. The government made move to massively centralise all of our DHBs, which initially at the time I thought was a good idea, but on reflection and in the current environment and coupled with everything else in terms of policy and what they're doing, I don't see that as a great idea at all. We need to keep this more local, but at any rate, we were stretched for doctors, specialist nurses, and it's been exacerbated by what's occurred through this vaccine mandate. This one up on the screen is reporting that around 4,000 workers have gone off the job or lost their jobs as a result of these mandates. In an already stretched workforce, I mean, it accounts to 1.8% or something along those lines, but regardless, that is absolute madness in the middle of a pandemic. It seems completely counterintuitive to me. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. If you're worried about hospital capacity, hospitals getting overrun, all the fear-mongering stuff that they throw out there at you for this virus, then why would you mandate something where 4,000 people are going to walk off the job? There's got to be a better way to do it. Even if you want to go down the path of testing, etc., that has to be the one. Within this group of 4,000, we've got 500 approximately nurses that have walked off the job. Other than the questions that do arise from the fact, what do they know? These are health professionals. Why are they walking off the job? We already had, get this, 3,500 nursing vacancies in New Zealand already. And then we're now added to that by getting rid of another 500 nurses due to these vaccine mandates and the fact that they don't want to take this thing. Numbers thrown out in this article include 52 doctors, 90 midwives, and that's another part of the health industry or subsection of the health industry that's under extreme stress. We are crying out for more midwives. That is absolute madness. There's been delays in all sorts of services as a result of this. And of course, with the additional people flying to the emergency room or to their doctor the moment that they've contract COVID-19, regardless of how severe it is, obviously massive pressure on our health system. So it's had the complete counterintuitive effect. Really, again, from this person's perspective, really, really disappointing to see. Let's move on to prison workers. 202 of those have walked out as a result of these mandates. Newshub once again reported on this. I'll keep reiterating through this. Take these numbers with a grain of salt. They could well be higher. The numbers are very, very hard to locate on the interwebs, whether you go to the different industries' websites, etc. It's not widely reported, but there we go, 202 prison workers also. Moving on to New Zealand Police. Let's chuck this NZ Herald one up on the screen there. This article states that around 1,000 New Zealand police officers are going to be walking off the job as a result of the vaccine mandates. Now, all of these articles, as they're reported in these mainstream media outlets, do say that they're going to continue to work with staff, which, to me, as much as they word it that it's working through with compassion, it's just more coercion, right? You'd have to sort of look at it that way from a cynical point of view in order to try and get more of these officers vaccinated. Interesting to note, within this article, a number of police officers are warning of serious repercussions as a result of these 1,000 police officers walking off the job. No doubt they'll be doing their best to retrain or move some others in from other industries or fast-track some through to cover up this hole. But again, police are a critical element of New Zealand society. Up and down the country, we can't afford to lose 1,000 of them specifically in these times when tensions are high. I wonder if by this stage you're starting to roll your eyes. The numbers just keep going. Let's move on to the next one. Within our Defence Force, let's chuck this Newshub article back up there as well. It's talking around 200 set to leave the Defence Force. I don't really know. This article is quite vague on details, as most of them are, but this one particularly so. What sort of an effect that would have on the Defence Force at large. Finally, fire and emergency in New Zealand. Let's chuck this Radio New Zealand article up on the screen for you. It's talking around 100 firefighters. From other information that I've seen around the internet, that to me seems a little bit low, and that's just anecdotally, but this is the official reporting that I've seen. It's showing 100, and they're talking again of the significant effect on a small workforce in a critical emergency care situation, and whether they're going to be able to get people trained even as a result of the fact that they've lost these 100 staff. Now, we're looking at a country of New Zealand with 5 million people, so these smaller numbers have such a dramatic effect across our country. And finally, the big one, which is the restaurant workers, close contact businesses, the gyms, the hairdressers, etc., and their requirement to be, their requirement to be vaccinated to be able to operate under the vaccine pass system. There is no way to get numbers on this. There's various different reports, anecdotal stories of individual restaurants and businesses closing due to this, based purely on their morals, and other staff, etc., walking out. But it's really hard to get a good gauge on this one. So that could be anything. Watch this space. When I do find further information on that, I'll bring it up for you guys on this channel. Combining all of this together, we're looking at around 6,500 job losses before we take into account the restaurant, hospitality and close contact businesses that have been affected by these as well, if they choose to run under the vaccine pass system. Again, take a grain of salt with that. All of my sources have been cited from mainstream news sites, which I don't really trust at all generally, but it's where we've got the information from. Some are better than others, and obviously we've got some vagaries in there in terms of the different reporters, but that's how we've collated it. I'd like to try and revisit this in about 6 months' time to see where we're at and see if I can get more direct sources. But based on that picture, the overall feeling from me is that nothing good has come from these mandates whatsoever. I'll leave it up to you to weigh up whether all of this has actually been worth it. Thanks once again for listening to me. This is one of hopefully many. I've really enjoyed chucking this all together and chatting to you. Ideally, we want to make this channel informative but unifying. I do hope it opens a few people's eyes and brings many, many more Kiwis and people around the world together. Got any questions or anything? By all means, chuck it in the comments below. I'll try and answer every single comment depending on how much traffic we get on this channel. I'll read them all. Love to hear from you. Keep informed, stay free, stay safe, and we'll see you on the next one.